So, as certain cards get more expensive, it becomes impossible for certain decks of mine to continue being $15 decks. As such, sometimes I just have to redo them. So, this is like the 5th time I've done Sefris. But let's talk about it anyway. So there is one card in particular that ruined my original Sefris deck, and that card is Sister Hospitaller. Now, if we look at my older video where I covered Sefris and my first redoing of the deck, where I realized after playing the deck for a lot of different tournaments that it just had some holes that needed to be patched up and things that needed to be ironed out, then I had this card. This was like one of the best cards in my arsenal, Sister Hospitaller, a creature that could revive anything and also give you life equal to its mana value. This gave you a lot of staying power in games and was just an all-around godsend for me. And you know what happened? Wizards never reprinted it. So that same Sister Hospitaller is now almost $10 for a card that was 19 cents when I made that video 1 year ago. That is a combination of this card being more sought after due to Terra decks being a thing, and also the fact that it hasn't received a reprint, and it never will receive a reprint because Wizards of the Coast is a company ran by people who do not like their players, apparently. So now I've got to patch this deck up. I have to figure out what to do to make this deck function on $15 again, while cards in general are getting more expensive, and also cards that were budget when I made the deck are no longer budget for anybody at all. Great. So today's commander is Sefris of the Hidden Ways, an Esper 2/3 commander that lets you go into the dungeon if a creature touches the graveyard from anywhere. Please note, this does not count creature tokens, as Sefris specifically says creature cards. This also means that she will not be able to see other cards hit the grave if she dies, because she does not see when a creature dies, she sees when it hits the graveyard, which happens after death in terms of Magic the Gathering timing stuff. So you are not going to be able to play Sefris and then play a board wipe and then go into the dungeon. That does not happen with Sefris. If you finish the dungeon, though, you get to reanimate a creature from your grave. This makes her, in my opinion, the single strongest reanimation commander of all time, because you can loop reanimation with her so easily. We need to talk about the dungeon so you know how to play the deck, though. Anytime you go into the dungeon, you choose to go into the top part of the dungeon, and then you have to follow the arrows through the dungeon to make your way through. So you begin at the cave entrance, and then you can choose to either go into the mine tunnels or the goblin lair. If you are in the goblin lair, you can only choose to go into the storeroom or the dark pool. You cannot choose to go into the fungi cavern because the goblin lair does not connect to the fungi cavern. Whenever you finish the dungeon, you are free from the dungeon, and if you enter the dungeon again, you may choose a new dungeon to enter. Okay, cool. Got it. The primary dungeon you want to go into is Lost Mines of Phandelver, due to the fact that it is the shortest dungeon available that does not cause us any grief. You could go into the Tomb of Annihilation and go through the Oubliette, and that would mean you have a 3 dungeon, and that would be fine, I guess, but it also makes you discard a card, sack an artifact, and a creature, and a land in so doing. So maybe don't do that. Maybe that's not the best place to go through. And then there is one other mechanic we got to talk about, and that is the initiative. So the initiative works like the Monarch. If you get the initiative, then you get a little thing that passes around the table like an emblem from a Planeswalker that says that you will get the next initiative trigger on your upkeep or the minute that you steal it from an opponent. This means that when you get the initiative out, games become a lot more violent a lot more quickly. So, the Undercity's first part of the initiative allows you to go into the deck and get a basic land out and put it into your hand. After that, you can put 1/1 counters on creatures, so on and so forth, until you finally hit the Throne of the Dead 3. At the Throne of the Dead 3, you reveal the top 3, or top 10 cards, of your deck, and then of those cards, throw a creature onto the battlefield, and it gains hexproof and 3/1/1 counters, and the hexproof dips off at the end of the turn cycle. Honestly, the Undercity is the most powerful of all the dungeons we have access to. It just sucks that it has 2 more rooms than what we normally would go through, or 1 more room than what we normally would go through. If you have access to the initiative, take it because it is faster, but the Lost Mines of Phandelver has 4 rooms, which is better for trying to set things up because we have 4 players at a usual game of Commander. Okay, cool. Now I've gotten all of the madness I have to get out of the way to understand how this deck works. So our goal is to reanimate creatures using Sefris and win with big reanimation targets. Now, in older versions of the deck, I did not have big reanimation targets. I focused mostly on control. This led to grindy games that were unfun for most people at the table. So we're going to have a few ways to end the game in here. And we're going to start out with Zetalpa. She is a card that people groan when they see, but at flying, double strike, vigilance, trample, and indestructible, it's very hard to argue with results. And because so many of our dungeons can add 1/1 counters to creatures, we can make Zetalpa a far more dangerous creature as we go. I wanted to add this into my main Sefris deck as well, my budgetless Sefris, but I couldn't find room next to cards like Valgavoth that just do so much more when you have access to the budget. But for a $15 deck, punching somebody with a Zetalpa for 10 or 12 or even 20 is what we are going to be aiming for. Then we have the Scion of Darkness, a trampling creature that can reanimate creatures from our opponent's graveyards if they hit, but the big thing with the Scion is it has cycling. We are going to be able to cycle this out of our hand using its own ability so that Sefris can see it and then get a dungeon trigger. We're then going to run a Sphinx of the Steel Wind. Honestly, I have this in here solely because it is Esper colored, and I think that it is neat. Sphinx of the Steel Wind has flying, first strike, vigilance, and lifelink, and pro red, pro green. This means it dodges things like Blasphemous Act and Ezre's Predation, and it has the ability to keep us in the game really well. This is a substitute for Sister Hospitaller. Losing access to the life gain of the Sister Hospitaller means we have to find it somewhere, and this is where we're going to have it. And we need that life gain because we will become the enemy of the table very, very quick. We also want to dig through the dungeon really fast, so Radiant Solar is going to be one of our primary ways of doing so. We can discard the Solar to gain life and go into the dungeon, and if any creature enters the battlefield while this is out, we go into the dungeon once more. There's a lot of infinite combos this fuels, so just be very, very careful with it. Then we have Ravenloft Adventurer, which will give us a Dalthy Voidwalker effect, killing our opponent's abilities to reanimate things, and also lets us get the initiative. Erakoa Sneak gives us the initiative and gives us a flying blocker, and Realsa Rail Kingpin, a newcomer to my Sefris decks, has Death Touch and the ability to give creatures 5/0 first strike and menace when they swing if we have completed a dungeon. And you know exactly where that 5/0 and menace is going on. It's going onto Zetalpa, making Zetalpa hit somebody for 18 if we didn't put any 1/1 counters on it from the dungeon, which is just glorious, just fantastic. Then we have some clones. We have Copy Crook because it can connive, Tomb of Horrors Adventurer because it can copy any of our other spells, Mirror, it also gives us the initiative, which is really good. Mirror Image, which is here because it costs 3 mana, and we can revive that using Sun Titan, and the Waxen Shape Thief, a new card for this deck that has cycling, so we can throw it to the grave with Sefris on the board to get a dungeon trigger. And then we need to remember that Reanimation is something that our commander cannot be the only one responsible for. So, we are going to be running 9 reanimation spells besides Sefris herself. From Edge of Eternities, we got Perigee Beckoner. This has the warp ability to allow a creature to revive if it were to die, and it gives that ability to a creature when it enters the battlefield. There are some fun loops we can trigger with this, and I think you're going to have a great time with this guy as a result. Then we have Scrounge for Eternity. This sacks a creature to reanimate a creature mana value 5 or less, and then makes a lander token. Redemption Choir, who is just a weak version of Sun Titan. Both of these allow us to reanimate a creature or anything really with mana value 3 or less from our graveyard. Karmic Guide reanimates anything from our graveyard and then can get itself killed with its own ability, which is great for Sefris. Dread Return reanimates anything and then lets us sack creatures to reanimate something again. Altar of Baal lets us reanimate anything by getting rid of the Goblin token that we can spawn from our Lost Mines of Fendelver. Victimize lets us sacrifice a creature to revive 2 creatures, and Yawgmoth's Vile Authoring allows us to sacrifice nothing, but it allows us to get rid of an opponent's creature while also summoning a creature from our graveyard. Then we need something that will allow us to sacrifice our creatures so that we can loop them, and we have a few cards that can do that. Unfortunately, Viscera Seer and Umbral Caller Zealot, the best cards we could be running, are too expensive at 50 cents and 75 cents respectively. So instead we're going to make do with Phyrexian Ghoul, Dross Hopper, Bloodthorn Vampire, Cartel Aristocrat, Nantuko Husk, and the Bloodflow Connoisseur. All of these are exactly the same card. They let us sacrifice a creature at instant speed. I've removed everything in the deck that sacked at Sorcerer sorcery speed that was a sack outlet outside of removal spells. So we have now powered this part of the deck up from its previous version. And that does it for everything in the core strategy of the deck. Go into the dungeon, reanimate big things, hit your opponents for lots, but we need to draw lots of cards to make any of that happen. And this is another area where this version of the deck has seen significant improvement. This time around, we are going to be running a lot more draw cards than we did before. Ignore the fact that I had to just make a quick change because I remembered that a certain card sucked and a certain card that I put in does not. The card that I just threw in because I remembered I needed to was Thought Courier. This allows us to draw a card and then discard a card from our hand. This is an effect that is shared with Merfolk Looter and also with Vohar Vidalian Desecrator. But Vohar allows us to also use spells from our grave if we use his sacrifice ability on top of that. Then we have Dreadwing Scavenger, a looter that allows us to get looting anytime that we attack with him, and he can become a great blocker once we become the arch enemy. We also have Malboro and Curator of Mysteries in here. While not strictly draw spells, they do allow us to cycle them for benefit with Sefris, which can help us a lot as well. Then we have Village Rites, Eviscerator's Insight, and Nasty End. All of these cards allow us to sack a creature to draw 2 cards, which is incredibly important when we are dealing with an opponent who is trying to get rid of our own creatures. Then we have Obsessive Stitcher, the strongest looter of our deck. It's a looter that can also reanimate things later in the game. Muldrifter is a divination that we can trigger Sefris with, and Matsalani the Great Door is a looter that allows us to flip into the core so we have access to a ton of mana if Sefris ever becomes too expensive later in the game. Because there is something else important I need to tell you in this deck once we get to the ramp and mana sections. That said, we're done with draw, so let's talk about removal. We're going to be running 16 cards that do removal and interaction and 3 board wipes. I used to run 4, but Ondu Inversion is becoming more expensive as it is currently out of print, so we are going down on that. I wanted to also run the new card that board wipes everything and then lets you mill, but I couldn't find space for it with the deck's budget, so we are running with these 16 removal and interaction pieces instead. Anyway, let's go through each of these and see what they do. Cathar Commando can get rid of artifacts or enchantments at instant speed because it has flash, and we sack it to make that happen, which is great. Bar the Gate is here from the original version of the deck as a counterspell that goes into the dungeon. Wizard's Retort does the same thing, but it doesn't let us go into the dungeon. It just costs 1 less if Sefris is out. Negate is still here from the original deck, but Refute is a new card that came out in Foundations, allowing us to counter a spell and then draw a card and discard a card. Then we have some newcomers, Dusk Mangler and Vile Mutilator. Both of these get rid of 6 cards from our opponents when they come onto the battlefield and allow us to close out games super well. The Mutilator's a flample creature, so it's easy to win games with that, and Dusk Mangler burns everybody for 4, and he's become one of my most favorite cards in Magic the Gathering since putting him in decks. Then we, of course, have my love, Meteor Golem. I love being able to get rid of anything at any point. Angel of the Ruins can get rid of multiple targets on the board, which is fantastic, and it also has plane cycling, so we can get rid of it with Sefris in order to get a good land from our deck into our hand, while also triggering dungeon stuff, which is just good. Butcher of Malakir is a great late-game creature, allowing us to take any of our sacrifices and turn them into group removal. Rite of Oblivion can sack creatures to get rid of any non-land permanent, and it has flashback. Then we have Plague Crafter, Demon's Disciple, and Accursed Marauder. All of these come onto the battlefield and make everybody sack a creature with us. Utter End is an instant speed card that can exile a non-land permanent, and yes, there are power crept versions of it, and I would rather use Despark, but at our budget, we do not have the ability to right now. Then we have Ashen Rider, which can get rid of any permanent at all when it enters the battlefield or when it dies, which is super easy to trigger with our sacrifice outlets and our sack draw spells. Then we have our board wipes of Necromantic Selection, which allow us to revive creatures from our opponent's graves when we use it. This can also be used to steal commanders due to timing restrictions. Cataclysmic Gearhulk, which can wipe everything off the board except for everybody's favorite cards. And then we have Nevinral Urborg Tyrant, a card that we can sacrifice to one of our sack outlets to wipe the entire board clean, and if we can loop it, we can even get a ton of black zombies out with his ability. Honestly, this thing is super powerful if we can pair it with, say, the Peregrine Beckoner. Revive our lovely card, our giant Nevinral, and then immediately put the Peregrine ability on it, and then sacrifice it so that we get Nevinral back out with a giant board state and blow up everything all at once. And that does it for everything in the deck that is not mana. So let's go ahead and talk about mana, where the biggest change of the deck can be found. So you'll notice something interesting. This deck is only running 2 ramp spells, and one of them comes into play after the commander. I've learned that with commanders that cost 3 mana that want to come out as soon as possible, budget decks don't have much of a way to get those commanders out at a reasonable time. We don't have access to 1 mana ramp unless we are in green, and so the point of ramp is kind of gone. And because Sefris gets around double spelling by reanimating cards, you get way more powerful when you can cast 2 to 3 spells in a turn, and you don't need to double spell when you're reanimating cards and spending no mana for them. Honestly, I'm gonna try this deck out with no ramp except for these 2 cards, because these 2 cards give us lands to see what happens. And honestly, my full power version of Sefris, I did this to, and it has been a blast to play still. So what are we doing here? Well, we've upped the land count to 40. You can't see it because it's behind my dumb head, but we've upped the land count to 40. That gave us the room as well to up our creature count to 43. By upping our creature count, it's way easier for Sefris to see targets hit the grave. By upping our land count, it's way easier for us to see the lands and not need the ramp. By only having ramp that sees lands, we dodge things like Vandal Blast, and by making sure that we've added in cards like Malboro, we now have access to more cards with swamp cycling or island cycling or plain cycling, just land cycling in general, which will allow us to dig through our deck way easier and get the lands we need so that we are not in bad situations later in the game. Honestly, I think that this way forward for early game reanimation strategies is a far better way to work right now, but, you know, more testing may show that I am wrong there. That said, we are running Wayfarer's Bauble, like I said, sack it early to get a basic land, and Sad Robot, which can be sacked to draw us a card, but also gets us a basic land when it touches the battlefield. Speaking of lands, we are running 4 swamps, 3 islands, and 3 plains, and that may seem like really low basic land counts, but we are actually running a pretty stacked land base. For Azorius lands, we have the tapped lands of Temple of Enlightenment and Irrigated Farmland, but for untapped lands, we have access to Port Town, Skycloud Expanse, Glacial Fortress, and Prairie Streams. The Fortress has been reprinted in precons recently, which means we now have access to better lands for this deck than we did before. Irrigated Farmland is new here because upping the land count means we need to have ways to cycle lands away in case we get mana flooded. For Dimir lands, we have the tapped lands of Temple of Deceit and Fetid Pools, but outside of these, we have the untapped lands of River of Tears, Darkwater Catacombs, Choked Estuary, Sunken Hollow, and Tainted Isle, all of which come to play untapped and work very well for our strategy. Then for our Orzhov lands, we have the tapped lands of Sunlit Marsh and Temple of Silence, as we want the Temple of Silence early and the Sunlit Marsh for our land cycling abilities, and our untapped lands of Tainted Field, Shine Shadow Snarl, and Newcomer Desolate Mire. And we're going to be adding in Tango lands to this deck as those get printed in further sets. For our fetching lands, we have Evolving Wilds, Terramorphic Expanse, Ash Barrens, Contaminated Landscape, Shire Terrace, Escape Tunnel, and Myriad Landscape. The Myriad Landscape is here because we have cut our ramp in all of our other packages, so we need to have it somewhere in case we want it, and land ramp is the safest. Contaminated Landscape still sits as the best marrying of what Terramorphic Expanse does, along with cards like Shire Terrace. Contaminated Landscape is just great. If you're running a 3-color deck, please run it. Then for Omni lands, we have Command Tower and Exotic Orchard. We're opting out of any tapped Omni lands because we have the tapped utility land of Port of Carfell, which can reanimate creatures, and Pit of Offering, which can get rid of problematic creatures from our opponent's graveyards. And that does it for everything in the deck. Now you know everything that's here. Now you know a basic idea of what it's trying to do. So let's talk about playing it. Looking at the opening hand here, it's actually a little wonky, but it does have access to all of our colors, so I'm willing to give it a shot. Let's go ahead and play that Terramorphic Expanse as our opening move, and let's crack it and get a land out of the deck to thin it. Going into the next turn, we have an Exotic Orchard we could play and a Contaminated Landscape we could play. I think the right move is play Contaminated Landscape, crack the island, tap the island to get rid of the Ash Barrens, and crack the landscape. Let's get lands out of our deck. That moves us into turn 3, where we draw an Eviscerator's Insight. That will be helpful for a follow-up turn. Let's go ahead and play Sefris out and pass to our opponents. On turn 4, we draw a Shire Terrace, which isn't super grand, but it does mean we can play an Arakoa Sneak and go into the Initiative Dungeon. The Initiative Dungeon gave us another land, and it was an island, and we drew a Sunken Hollow, so now we actually have dual-colored lands available to us. What I'd like to do right now is, you know what, here's what we're going to do. We're going to pay 2, and we are going to warp our Peregrine Beckoner. Another target creature gains, it will come back if it dies. That's going to be the Arakoa Sneak. We also gained an extra counter because of the Undercity from earlier, so we are now going to pay 2. Eviscerator's Insight, sacrifice our Arakoa Sneak. Arakoa Sneak dying gives us another counter on the initiative, and then summons it right back, giving us another counter on the initiative. If we are sticking to the left side of the initiative, then that will draw us a card right here, and it will draw us 2 cards because of the Eviscerator's Insight. And then the Peregrine Familiar will warp away, safe and sound. And now, if our opponents attack us at all to get the initiative from us, the Arakoa Sneak blocking will kill the sneak and will give us the final bit of the dungeon, which will be just awful for everybody except us. I'm very happy with where we're at right now. We move into turn 6, and let's play a Choked Estuary, showing the island that we have. And I forgot we needed to discard a card in the last turn. And we need to get rid of a creature in our hand. So what we're going to do is we're going to pay 2. And we are going to cycle away the Waxen Shape Thief. The Waxen Shape Thief being cycled away does make it come back. Now, bear in mind, we're assuming that somebody attacked us and got the initiative. We had the Shape Thief in our hand, so we just kept it. We're going to use the Shape Thief to give us the final bit of the initiative. It's going to come in as a copy of Arakoa Sneak, which is then going to put us back into the initiative dungeon. So that lets us look at the top 10 cards of our library and reanimate a thing. We're going to get Sun Titan out from the library with the initiative's ability, and Sun Titan's just going to reanimate a land because that's what he does. And Sefris has the ability to reanimate a thing, but we don't have anything in the grave to reanimate, but we did get Sun Titan out, so that's just as good. We're then going to get Thought Courier and Altar of Baal out, and then sacrifice the Contaminated Landscape to get a basic land out of our deck once more. Moving into the next turn, we draw a Cataclysmic Gearhulk, and I think that this is where, if our opponents are winning, we can use the Gearhulk to set them back, but if they're not, then we don't have to worry about it. The Undercity allows us to go into the Secret Entrance. Let's go ahead and add 2 more counters to the Sun Titan. Let's make the Sun Titan hit for lots and lots of damage. We do, man, what I really want right now, more than anything, is to warp this in and then gain its ability right here. But we don't have access to that right now, and that kind of sucks. I mean, we do have access to it, but we don't have anything in the grave to reanimate. So let's tap the Thought Courier, and let's draw a card and see what we get. Ooh, a Wizard's Retort. That's good for later. Let's discard the Cataclysmic Gearhulk as a just in case, and that triggers the dungeon once more, burning somebody for 5. Then we're going to hold on to the Wizard's Retort as a counterspell in case our opponents do anything. So what we'll do now is we'll just play Sad Robot, go into the library and get a basic land out, and then swing with our Sun Titan to reanimate the Contaminated Aquifer. And then if our opponents do anything, we pay 3 and we Wizard's Retort the card away. Turn 8, our rampless deck seems to have a lot of ramp in it right now, so let's play an Exotic Orchard, tap the Thought Courier, draw a card, and discard Merfolk Looter. Let's then pay 1, 2, 3, play the Mozzolani. I forgot that we actually are in the draw card stage of the initiative. Let's play Mozzolani. We discarded the Merfolk Looter. Oh, I'm sorry. We don't get to do that yet. Discarding the Merfolk Looter finishes the Throne of the Dead 3, so let's go ahead and see what we get. We get Reaserail Kingpin, which will give us the initiative once more. and also will allow us to give our Sun Titan extra power whenever it swings, or we can give that power to Arakoa Sneak so that it's easier for it to get in there and do its job. For now, though, I think the correct thing to do is to pay 3 and get the Blood Flow Connoisseur out. This will allow us to sack creatures to reanimate things. Oh, also, I'm dumb. Sefris was able to reanimate the Merfolk Looter because we did what we did. So now we can just punch out, and on our opponent's turn, the Sun Titan's going to reanimate the Contaminated Aquasphere again, so we can ramp once more. But on our opponent's turns, we use the Blood Flow Connoisseur to sack the Sad Robot, putting us further into the dungeon, adding 2/1/1 counters to anything, say the Arakoa Sneak. And then, yeah, we just get to sack creatures on each of our opponent's turns to go further into the dungeon as we need. That way, on our turn, since we have a big board state, our opponents are not going to punch through us. We get to begin our turn with the initiative giving us another creature out for free. And it may just be the Sync of the Steel Wind, honestly, at this point. Yeah, just Sync of the Steel Wind. We just get big board state. Really, just having a sack outlet out with a bunch of creatures in Sefris means that we can do whatever we want. It's just kind of nutty, honestly. Once you have the initiative, you can just keep getting free stuff if you have a sack outlet. It is great. So what would we do if we wanted to upgrade this deck a little bit? If you are upgrading this deck, cards like Shieldred as powerful reanimation targets are going to be some of your best options. I like using Shieldred and Elish Norn in my version of the deck, but pick whatever big guys you want. The one biggest, best reanimation target you could possibly get, though, is Valgavoth, Terror Eater. This card can steal all your opponent's stuff to make it far easier to close out games. Honestly, the thing is great. Then, if you are upgrading your deck, MDFCs are an easy no-brainer. I wish Malakir Rebirth wasn't a $10 uncommon, but MDFCs do allow your deck a ton of flexibility, and we have a lot of really good ones to choose from, with Witch Enchanter, Glasspool Mimic, and Malakir Rebirth being just good ones in general. Then we also have Spell the Profane, which is another MDFC that allows you to blow up more things. Honestly, as you increase the land count of your decks to make them more consistent, MDFCs are going to be your best bet to not have any negative effects from that. Tortured Existence is another one that I would definitely run. Being able to discard creature cards and loop them around with Sefris on the board is just great. Sister Hospitaller is another upgrade that used to be in the main deck, but is now just an upgrade because it costs so damn much. Necromancy and Animate Dead are also great upgrades in here because they can be reanimated with Sun Titan. Then I would add in Archfiend of Cruelty. This is second only to Valgavoth in terms of how powerful it is and how much it can swing a game in your favor. Then I would add in better looters. Likeness Looter and Rona Herald of Invasion are some of the best looters you have access to, and I would 100% try to grab them. They're only 50 cents each, but that did make them too rich for my blood with this deck. That Malboro in the deck can also be swapped out for a Troll of Khazad-dûm. Its swamp cycling is way better than what the Malboro does, so definitely get your hands on that. The D-Spark is better than the Utter End in terms of costing less mana, easier to hold up 2 mana than 4, so I would definitely go for a D-Spark in this deck too. And finally, an Archfiend of Ilfnir if your table will allow you to. It's got flying, it can close out games, and it has cycling, so we can get it in the graveyard easy for Sefris to see. I used to run this in older budget versions of Sefris, and its price bounces around too much for me to actually run this in the budget version anymore. So if you can get your hands on it, it's great. It's in a precon. Go ahead and use it. It is fantastic. And that does it for updating Sefris. With all that said, hopefully this version of $15 Sefris will stand as the version of the deck for the next year or two. It seems that every year or so I have to update this deck in order to get it back online. So let me know what you think in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you haven't already. And as always, everybody, if you have a commander you want me to cover, let me know down there and insert into video tagline here.